The vast emptiness of space stretched out before Nate Ward, an endless sea of stars and debris. His ship, the Echo, drifted silently through the wreckage of a forgotten battle. Nate leaned back in his worn pilot's seat, scanning the field for anything worth salvaging. This wasn't the life he had imagined when he first joined the Galactic Alliance. But dreams had a way of getting crushed, just like the charred husks of the warships floating around him. A beep from the console snapped him out of his reverie. Distress signal. Nate muttered, squinting at the screen. A faint, erratic pulse appeared among the scattered debris. It was weak, but it was there. He hesitated, hand hovering over the controls. Distress signals usually meant trouble. In this lawless part of the galaxy, it could be pirates, a trap, or worse, a wounded soldier from one of the warring factions still clinging to life. Nate sighed, shaking his head. He was supposed to be done with that life. No more heroes, no more causes, but something gnawed at him, a stubborn pull in his gut. With a flick of his wrist, he set a course for the signal. The source turned out to be an escape pod, barely intact, lodged between two chunks of twisted metal. Its exterior was scorched, signs of a fierce battle. Nate's heart quickened. If there was someone alive in there, they didn't have much time. Docking the Echo to the pod, he pried open the hatch. The air inside was stale, metallic. And there, slumped against the wall, was a figure, thin, alien, and unmistakably royal. Her silver skin glimmered under the faint light, but her face was pale, streaked with blood. Dark violet eyes blinked weakly at him as she stirred. Get away. Her voice was soft, but defiant, laced with a strength that didn't match her condition. Nate's brow furrowed. Relax, I'm not here to hurt you. She coughed, trying to push herself up, but collapsed with a wince. I don't need your help, human. Yeah, well, too bad. I'm not leaving you here. He reached out to lift her, and she groaned in protest, too weak to fight him off. Her limbs were limp, her breath shallow. He carried her to the Echo's small medbay, laying her down as gently as he could. Why are you even bothering? She rasped. Her eyes narrowed at him, filled with suspicion. You think saving me will get you some kind of reward? Nate snorted, securing the ship for takeoff. Trust me, I'm no hero. I just couldn't stand the thought of listening to you complain while you died. She fell silent, glaring at him, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Whoever she was important, and dangerous. His gut told him to stay far away from this mess, but as he set the Echo on its course, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious alien princess was about to pull him into something far bigger than either of them. The Echo hummed quietly as it sped away from the debris field. Nate sat at the controls, glancing over at his unexpected passenger. The alien princess, Zara, as she had grudgingly revealed, lay on the medbay cot, her sharp violet eyes watching him with a wariness that cut deeper than her wounds. You need to rest, Nate said, not looking back. I need to get off this ship, she snapped, her voice stronger now but still laced with fatigue. You have no idea what you've dragged yourself into. Nate gritted his teeth, tightening his grip on the control stick. You were half dead when I found you. Maybe a little gratitude wouldn't hurt. Zara sat up, wincing as she did. If the Empire finds me on this ship, you're dead. You understand that, right? They won't care if you saved me, they'll blast you out of the sky. Nate let out a low breath. Yeah, figured something like that. But I'm not just going to dump you in space, princess. Her eyes narrowed at the word princess, but she said nothing. Instead, she pulled herself up to her feet, swaying slightly. Then you need to keep moving. They're hunting for me right now, and a piercing alarm cut her off. Nate's heart dropped as a red light blinked on the console. That's not good, he muttered. Zara's expression hardened. They found us. On the screen, a massive Imperial cruiser loomed, its sleek, obsidian hull cutting through the void like a predator. Nate could feel the tension rise in the pit of his stomach. Strap in, he said, punching the controls to push the Echo into overdrive. The ship lurched forward, engines straining as they sped away from the cruiser. Behind them, the dark ship fired up its engines in pursuit. Zara stumbled to the co-pilot's seat and strapped in, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. "You're not going to outrun them," she said coldly. "Not in this bucket of bolts." Nate shot her a sidelong glance, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "Watch it. This bucket of bolts is the only thing keeping you alive right now." A blast rocked the ship as laser fire from the cruiser barely missed them, scorching the edge of a nearby asteroid. Nate cursed under his breath, weaving the echo between the rocks in a desperate attempt to lose the Imperial ship. "They won't stop," Zara warned, her voice steady but grim. "You can't just hide in an asteroid field." "I'm not planning to hide," Nate shot back, eyes darting across the controls. "I've got a plan." Zara raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" A smirk tugged at the corner of Nate's mouth. "See that belt of ice rocks ahead? If I can hit the right spot, I might just collapse it behind us. It'll buy us some time, or it'll kill us both," she muttered. "Guess we'll find out." Nate jammed the throttle forward, diving the ship into the icy asteroid belt, Imperial fire close behind. He could feel the tension between them, but for the first time, Zara's fear flickered into something else. Trust, maybe just enough to survive this chase. The Echo sliced through the asteroid belt, dodging massive ice boulders as they tumbled in slow motion, glittering in the starlight. Nate's knuckles whitened as he gripped the controls. He could feel the engines straining, the ship rattling under the pressure. But he had no choice. They had to make it through. Behind them, the Imperial cruiser loomed like a predator, firing shot after shot, each one getting closer. "I hope you know what you're doing," Zara muttered, her voice tight with tension. Nate didn't respond, eyes locked on the monitor. He couldn't afford to be distracted. He needed to find the perfect asteroid, just the right size, just the right trajectory. Something that could block the cruiser's path, but wouldn't crush them in the process. "There," he whispered, spotting it, a massive ice chunk on the edge of the belt, its path aligned with the cruiser's. Nate's hand hovered over the detonator switch. "You've only got one shot at this," Zara warned, her voice calmer now, watching him with a critical gaze. "Thanks for the pep talk," Nate grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. With a deep breath, he punched the button. The ship shuddered as the blast echoed behind them. Nate's heart pounded as he watched the explosion ripple through the asteroid belt, sending a cascade of icy debris crashing down toward the cruiser. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit, both he and Zara holding their breath. Then, with a violent crack, the debris slammed into the cruiser's hull, sending it spinning. The Imperial ship slowed, engulfed in a cloud of shattered ice. Nate let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You did it," Zara said softly, a flicker of surprise in her voice. "I didn't think it would work." "Neither did I," Nate admitted with a smirk, but the tension hadn't left his shoulders. He knew it wasn't over. They'd bought time, but the Empire wouldn't stop. Not for her. Zara leaned back in the co-pilot's seat, staring out at the swirling asteroid belt. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence, but the weight of unspoken words hung between them. "Why are they after you?" Nate finally asked, breaking the quiet. "What makes you so important?" Zara's eyes flickered, her expression hardening. "I rebelled," she said simply. "Against the Empire. Against my family." She turned to face him, her jaw set in determination. "My people want me dead. And the Empire. They want me alive. They think they can break me." Nate frowned, glancing at her. "And can they?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips, bitter and cold. "They've tried. They'll keep trying. But they won't succeed." She paused, studying him. "You saved me back there. You didn't have to." Nate shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Couldn't just leave you to die." Zara nodded slowly, a strange look crossing her face, something between gratitude and suspicion. "Then it seems we have a common enemy." Nate's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested in getting involved in your rebellion, Princess." Zara's expression darkened. You already are. Outside, the debris field thinned, but the threat still loomed. They were fugitives now, tied together by a fragile alliance, but Nate could feel it. This was only the beginning. The Echo glided through the empty void of space, the asteroid belt now a distant blur. But the tension inside the ship clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Nate sat at the control panel, his eyes fixed on the starlit horizon, but his thoughts were on the woman seated behind him. Zara was silent, her gaze distant as she nursed the healing wounds on her arm. Nate had patched her up as best as he could, but the deeper wounds, the ones etched into her past, remained untouched. Where to now? Zara's voice broke the silence, soft yet commanding. Nate glanced over his shoulder. We find a place to lay low. Make repairs. Figure out our next move. Her eyes narrowed. I don't have the luxury of lying low. Every second we waste gives the Empire more time to track us down. Not we, Nate corrected, turning fully to face her. You. This is your fight. I just happened to pick up the wrong distress signal. Zara's expression hardened. Is that what you think? That you're just some unlucky scavenger who stumbled into the wrong mess? Pretty much, Nate muttered, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut that told him he was already in too deep. Zara stood, moving toward him, her movements more graceful now despite the lingering pain. Do you know why the Empire wants me alive, Nate? It's not just because I rebelled. It's because I know things. Secrets that could topple their rule. Information they'll kill anyone to protect. Nate arched a brow. And what exactly do I have to do with any of that? You have a ship, she said, her voice steady but urgent. You can move freely, go places I can't. The Empire will keep chasing me, but with your help, we could strike back. Take them down. Nate shook his head, laughing bitterly. You're talking about taking on an empire, princess. Do I look like the kind of guy who fights wars? Zara's eyes flashed with intensity. You already fought one, didn't you? I can see it in you. You've seen what they're capable of. Nate's jaw clenched, memories of the Galactic Alliance's brutal war flashing in his mind, images of destruction, death, and betrayal. He had sworn he'd never get involved in another conflict. Never again, that part of my life is over, he said quietly. Zara's gaze softened, her voice lowering. You think you can outrun them forever? The Empire doesn't leave loose ends, Nate. Not me, and not anyone who's helped me. Before he could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life. A voice filled the cabin, distorted but unmistakably imperial. Echo, this is Captain Voran of the Imperial Fleet. Surrender the fugitive and your ship will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Nate's blood ran cold. They'd found them. His hands tightened around the control panel as the reality of his situation settled in. He could hand Zara over, walk away, and disappear into the stars like he always had, but her eyes were locked on him, unflinching. They'll kill you, she said softly. No matter what you do. Nate stared at the console, his heart pounding. He had a choice to make, and whatever he chose, there was no turning back. Looks like I don't have much of a choice, do I? Nate's heart hammered in his chest as Captain Voran's voice echoed through the Echo's comm system. Each word laced with a cold certainty. His fingers hovered over the controls, indecision gnawing at him. Zara stood still, her gaze locked on him, tense and expectant. The quiet between them was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engine and the countdown of approaching doom. Surrender the fugitive and your ship will be spared. He swallowed hard, knowing full well what that meant. Handing Zara over would mean saving his life but condemning hers. Not just to imprisonment, no, something much worse. The Empire had ways of making people disappear. I can't ask you to do this, Zara whispered, though her voice betrayed no weakness. It was as if she was bracing herself for the inevitable. You're not asking, Nate muttered, eyes glued to the console. But that doesn't mean I'm not already involved. She shook her head. They'll kill you for defying them. There's no escape from them, Nate. You can still hand me over. Buy yourself time. Nate clenched his jaw. Every instinct screamed for him to save himself, to take the easy way out. But he wasn't the kind of man to take the easy way out. Not anymore, we're not surrendering, he said, voice firm. Zara's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected him to make that choice. You're risking everything. Nate didn't respond, his hand already moving to the controls, plotting a course. The Imperial cruiser was still distant, but it wouldn't take long for it to close the gap. He had one last trick up his sleeve. It was reckless, maybe even suicidal, but it was the only way. The ship lurched forward as Nate jammed the thrusters, sending the Echo diving into a nearby nebula. The swirling gases outside the viewport glowed in vibrant shades of purple and blue, casting an eerie light over the cockpit. Nate's fingers danced across the console, trying to block out the warning alarms blaring around him. This nebula was infamous for its electromagnetic storms, a natural shield that could disrupt the Empire's tracking systems. But it could just as easily tear the Echo apart. Are you insane? Zara's voice cut through the noise, her expression somewhere between awe and horror. No one survives flying through this. Even the Empire won't follow us here. That's the idea, Nate said through gritted teeth, gripping the control stick as the ship shuddered violently. Outside, the nebula raged. Bolts of energy crackled through the clouds, dangerously close to the hull. The Echo groaned in protest as it navigated through the storm, each second feeling like it might be their last. Zara braced herself against the wall. Her face pale but determined. What's your plan, Captain? Hide here forever? Nate smirked, though the tension in his voice betrayed his nerves. Not forever. Just long enough to lose them. A sudden jolt sent Zara tumbling forward, and Nate cursed under his breath. The storm was getting worse, and their ship was barely holding together. But there, just ahead, he spotted it, a clearing in the storm, a pocket of safety. He pushed the engines harder, forcing the ship through the final stretch of the nebula. As they emerged into open space, the alarms quieted. Silence, Nate exhaled, leaning back in his seat. We're alive. For now, Zara murmured, standing up straight again. She gave him a long, unreadable look, the weight of their shared survival hanging in the air. Why did you do it? She asked, her voice softer now. Nate glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the distant stars outside. Because I've seen what they do to people like you. And I'm not letting them win. Not again. Zara's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering in her eyes. Then you've made an enemy of the Empire. Nate shrugged, feeling the gravity of his decision settle over him. I guess we both have. And in the quiet void of space, a fragile alliance had solidified into something unbreakable. Nate stared into the vastness of space, the stars twinkling like scattered diamonds against the deep void. The Echo floated in a secluded pocket just outside the nebula, its hull still rattling from the storm they had barely escaped. The adrenaline that had fueled his reckless decision was wearing off, replaced by an all-consuming weight of uncertainty. Now what? Zara asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. She stood at the viewport, her silhouette framed by the cosmic glow, eyes scanning the endless expanse. Nate turned to the console, fingers tapping restlessly against the controls. We need to find somewhere to regroup. A planet where we can lay low until the heat dies down. And then? Zara pressed, her tone sharp. You're still just a scavenger, Nate. What do you plan to do when the Empire comes looking for us? Nate hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't have a plan, at least, not a good one. He began, but Zara's piercing gaze silenced him. I have contacts, she said, a flicker of hope sparking in her voice. People who can help us. But we need to get to them fast. Contacts? Nate raised an eyebrow. In the Empire? You trust these people? Trust is a luxury we can't afford, she shot back. But they'll help us, if we can find them. With a reluctant sigh, Nate adjusted their course toward a nearby planet, Sierra 3. It was a small, unremarkable rock on the fringes of known space, known for its black market dealings and unsavory characters. The perfect place to blend in, and potentially dangerous enough to harbor allies. As they approached, the planet came into view, shrouded in dark clouds that mirrored the turmoil inside Nate's heart. Sierra 3 wasn't just a hiding place, it was a gamble. I've been here before, Zara said, her voice low and reflective. I'll lead us to the safe houses. Nate nodded, but unease crept over him. He could feel the weight of the Empire's gaze on them. Even from light years away. Let's just hope your contacts are still in business. The echo descended through the atmosphere, the ship shaking violently as they passed through the turbulent clouds. Nate wrestled with the controls, forcing the ship to stay steady. It was a rough landing, but they touched down on a deserted patch of ground, the ship's thrusters hissing as it powered down. Here we are, Zara said, a mix of anticipation and dread in her voice. Follow my lead. Stepping out onto the barren landscape, Nate was immediately struck by the smell of burnt metal and scorched earth. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of forgotten dreams and lost lives. Zara took the lead. Navigating through the craggy terrain, her posture exuding a mix of confidence and caution. They reached a rundown building, its entrance adorned with flickering neon signs in a language Nate didn't recognize. This is it, Zara said, glancing back at him. Stay close. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with low chatter and the clinking of glasses. It felt like a den of misfits, the perfect place for them to hide. Zara led him through the smoky haze, past tables of wary patrons eyeing them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Here, she gestured toward a shadowy corner, where a figure hunched over a table. Lauren. He'll help us. As they approached, Nate's instincts screamed. The figure looked up, a smirk spreading across his face, but it wasn't friendly. Zara, he said, voice smooth and laced with contempt. I didn't expect to see you back here, especially not with a human. Nate's heart raced, his senses heightened. He could feel the tension thrumming through the air, like a storm about to break. Lauren, I need your help, Zara stated, her voice steady. We're in trouble. Trouble? Lauren laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the dim light. You've always had a knack for that, haven't you? Nate glanced between them, sensing the danger, the unspoken tension hanging heavily in the air. They had stepped into a storm of their own, a whirlwind of betrayal and desperation. Do we have a deal? Zara pressed, ignoring Lauren's taunts. Depends, he replied, leaning back in his chair, eyes glinting with mischief. What's the price? Nate's pulse quickened, realizing they were now in a precarious dance, teetering on the edge of danger. As he locked eyes with Zara, a silent agreement passed between them. Whatever it took, they would survive this storm together.